The morning sun rose hard and merciless over the Arizona territory, spilling light across a land of dry mesquite and ghost-colored stone. Dust hung thick in the air like breath that refused to die. Down in the cavalry outpost of Red Mesa, a small crowd gathered near the whipping post, a splintered beam standing tall at the edge of camp. Darkened by blood and years of punishment, they had tied Clara Hensley there at first light. Her wrists were raw from the coarse rope, her hair tangled with dirt. The white calico dress she wore, the only decent one she had left, was torn at the shoulder where the sergeant had dragged her from her father's wagon. She was 20 years old, soft-spoken, and far too proud for the hard life the frontier demanded. But that pride was all she had left now, and she held it like a weapon. 10 lashes for aiding the enemy, Captain Warren had said, his voice carrying through the dry wind. The Apache boy she hid in her barn cost us 2 good men. Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was thick with dust and shame. But her eyes, those steady blue eyes, met his and didn't waver. She hadn't meant to cause harm. The child she'd hidden had been no more than 12, half-starved and frightened. She'd given him bread, water, and a blanket. For that, she'd been branded a traitor. The whip cracked once, sharp as thunder. The first lash tore her dress. The second split skin. By the third, her knees buckled, but she refused to cry out. The soldiers muttered, uneasy. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. From the high ridges beyond the camp, Tarek watched. He was an Apache warrior, tall and hard-edged as the rocks themselves. The sun caught the copper tone of his skin and the long black braid that fell against his back. His father, Chief Kona, had forbidden him to come near the white men's camp, but Tarek had ignored the order. He'd heard whispers of a white woman punished for showing mercy to one of their own, and something in that story had drawn him like a storm draws lightning. Now, as he watched the soldiers break her body with their lashes, a strange anger rose inside him, not the kind born of battle or vengeance, but something deeper, something that struck his heart like a spear. The whip cracked again. Clara's legs gave out completely. She hung limp in the ropes, her face pale beneath streaks of dust and blood. The men, seeing her fall, loosened her bonds and let her drop into the dirt like a broken doll. Captain Warren spat beside her and barked, "Leave her! If the sun don't finish her, the coyotes will." They rode away laughing. For a while, the only sound was the wind sighing through the sagebrush. Tarek stayed hidden among the rocks until the last hoofbeat faded. Then he descended the slope, silent as shadow. He knelt beside her, seeing her chest rise in shallow breaths. Her back was a ruin of welts. She stirred faintly when he touched her shoulder. Her cracked lips moved, barely forming a word. "Please, just let me die." Tarek frowned. "No," he said in English, his voice low and firm. "You do not die here." He lifted her into his arms, her weight light as a bird's. Her head fell against his chest and her blood stained the beads at his neck. As he mounted his horse, he looked once toward the horizon, the land of his people, the land of danger. If he took her there, he would defy his own tribe's law. Still, he turned the horse toward the mountains. Behind him, the soldiers' camp shimmered in the heat, empty and heartless. Ahead lay the canyons, the cool shadows, and the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. The desert had seen many acts of cruelty. But that day, under the wide, unforgiving sky, it also bore witness to one act of mercy, a mercy that would ignite a fire stronger than any whip could silence. Tarek rode through the dying light, his horse's hooves cutting quiet prints into the red earth. The woman in his arms was no more than breath and blood, her head limp against his chest. Each time the horse stumbled, he tightened his hold, afraid she might slip away before dawn. The desert around them stretched wide and endless, sand, stone, and silence. Only the cry of a distant hawk and the wind over the ridges bore witness to the outlaw act he had just committed. By taking her, Tarek had defied his father's command and his people's law. No Apache warrior was to bring a white woman into their land, especially one who had drawn blood from their kind, even by mistake. Yet the sight of her at that post, broken but unbowed, had struck him like lightning. She had not begged. She had not wept. She had endured what most warriors could not. The sun dipped behind the mountains, bleeding crimson into the sky. Tarek reached the mouth of a canyon known only to his people, Coyote's Spine, a place of shadows and cold springs where he sometimes hunted alone. He dismounted and laid the woman on a bed of soft moss near a pool fed by trickling water. Her skin burned with fever. Her lips were split and dry, He knelt beside her, untying the torn remnants of her dress with careful hands. He poured cool water onto a cloth and washed away the blood from her back. She moaned when the water touched her wounds, a sound half pain, half relief. Tarek murmured softly in Apache, words meant to comfort the dying. "Sleep, white bird. The sun will not hurt you here." He crushed herbs between his palms, sage, yarrow, and the bitter root his mother once used for pain, and spread the paste over her welts. The smell filled the air, sharp and clean. He wrapped her in a deerskin blanket and built a small fire to chase the cold from the canyon floor. For a long while, he sat beside her, silent, listening to her shallow breaths. He could not name what he felt. Duty, perhaps. Pity. Or maybe it was something older, something he had buried beneath war and loss. Near midnight, Clara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. The first thing she saw was the firelight flickering against a face. Dark, strong, unfamiliar. She tensed, a weak cry rising from her throat. "Where am I?" she whispered. Her voice was rough as sandpaper. Tarek looked at her steadily. "Safe." Her gaze darted around the cave. The flicker of the flames cast strange shapes on the walls, shapes that looked like spirits. She tried to push herself upright, but pain shot through her back. You're Apache," she gasped, the fear returning. "Yes." He met her eyes without flinching. "Then why?" She croaked. "Why bring me here? Why not finish what they started?" He looked toward the fire, its glow catching the sharp planes of his face. "Because no one should die that way," he said simply. "Not even one who is my enemy." Clara stared at him, confusion and disbelief twisting inside her. She had grown up hearing stories of the Apache, savages, killers, demons of the desert. Yet this man had saved her life when her own kind had left her to rot. Her strength failed again, and she slumped back, eyes half closed. "Then what will you do with me?" Tarek hesitated. His people would call her a curse. His father would demand her death. But looking at her now, fragile, lost, trembling under the same stars that shone over his homeland, he could not bring himself to abandon her. "Rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow we ride." He laid another log on the fire and turned his face toward the mouth of the canyon. Beyond it, the night stretched black and full of danger. The pale moon slid across the sky, and Tarek's thoughts wandered to what the spirits might say of this act. He had stolen a wounded dove from the jaws of men, and in doing so, he had set himself against both worlds. When dawn came, the desert would whisper his name in fear and wonder, but for now there was only the sound of the fire and the soft breathing of the woman fate had placed in his care. By sunrise, the desert had turned to gold and flame. Heat shimmered off the rocks and the air smelled of dust and juniper. Tarek had been awake long before the light touched the canyon floor. He stood outside the cave, his bow slung across his back, scanning the ridges for riders. Every heartbeat carried a warning. His people would come. Behind him, Clara stirred. Her voice was faint but alive. "Where are we?" she asked, her words soft and unsure. "In the lands of my people," Tarek said without turning. That answer chilled her more than the night air. She pulled the deerskin closer around her shoulders. "Your people. They'll kill me, won't they?" Tarek's jaw tightened. "They will try, but they will find me first." He spoke as a man already condemned, and Clara didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid. She watched him as he walked down to the stream, the morning light glinting off the beads and metal bands around his arms. Every movement was quiet, deliberate. He was unlike any man she had known, proud yet gentle in a way that confused her. When he returned, he handed her a small wooden bowl filled with cool water. "Drink," he said. "Then we ride to my camp. You will be judged there." "Judged?" Her voice cracked. "For what?" "For being here," Tarek said simply. "For what I have done." They rode through the narrow passes that led toward the Apache stronghold, a hidden valley rimmed by stone cliffs and guarded by watchful eyes. As they entered, voices rose from the shadows, warriors stepping forward, bows drawn, faces painted in warning. "Tarek," one of them shouted. "You bring a white woman here? Are you mad?" Another voice answered, deeper and full of authority. Chief Kona, Tarek's father, stepped into view. His hair streaked with gray, his presence as heavy as thunder. "You shame us," he said, his gaze like cold iron. "You bring poison into our land." Tarek dismounted, lifting Clara gently from the horse. She swayed, weak but defiant, clutching the blanket around her. The tribe formed a wide circle around them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Enemy. Ghost woman. Curse. Kona raised his hand and silence fell. You know the law, my son. No white blood in our camp. You have betrayed your people. Tarek met his father's eyes. I have broken no law of the spirits. I took her from death. I will answer for that. The old chief's eyes narrowed. Then answer now. He gestured to the medicine man who stepped forward, shaking a rattle made of bone and feathers. The old man's voice rose in a chant, calling for the spirits to judge. The white woman is marked by pain and deceit, he declared. If she stays, sickness will come. If she leaves, she will die in the wild. The spirits demand balance. Her life or yours, Tarek. The words struck like arrows. Clara's head spun. No, she gasped. Don't die for me. She stepped forward, swaying on her feet. I never asked for this. Tarek looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. You did not ask to be beaten either, he said quietly. He turned back to his father. I will not surrender her. If death is the price, I pay it. But no more blood for the cruelty of men. The crowd erupted in shouts, anger boiling like wildfire. Tarek's brother, Nantan, pushed through them, his face twisted in disbelief. You would betray your own blood for a white woman? Tarek didn't flinch. I would betray no one. I would honor life. The chief's hand rose again for silence. His voice was heavy with sorrow. Then you are no longer of this tribe. You will take her and leave before the sun sets. If you return, we will hunt you. The sentence fell like a stone between them. Tarek nodded once, slow and steady. He took Clara's hand, small, trembling, uncertain, and led her back to the horse. As they rode out of the valley, the tribe turned their backs on him. Even his brother looked away. The drums that had once beaten in his honor now sounded behind them like a warning of death. Clara looked back only once. Smoke from the campfires curled into the morning air like the last breath of everything Tarek had lost. He didn't speak again until they reached the ridge above the valley. You see now, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the horizon. There is no going back for either of us. And beneath the endless western sky, the exile began. The hidden valley was quiet except for the soft rush of a mountain stream and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk. Tarek had built a shelter from fallen branches and hides, a crude but safe refuge carved into the canyon walls. Clara lay on a bed of soft moss wrapped in a thick blanket, her body trembling under the weight of fever. Her skin was hot, her breath shallow, and her blue eyes glazed with pain. Tarek knelt beside her, his hands steady as he fanned her face with a strip of leather. The herbs he had gathered, sage, yarrow, and a bitter root, were crushed into a paste and applied to the wounds across her back. Each motion was precise, practiced, the hands of a man accustomed to both battle and care. Drink this, he said softly, holding a gourd to her lips. The water was cool and sweetened with crushed juniper berries. Clara sipped weakly, coughing, and the corners of her mouth trembled in confusion and fear. You saved me, she whispered, barely audible. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from both the whip and her fever. Why did you save me? Tarek looked away, staring at the jagged peaks above the valley. His jaw was tight. Because no one should die like that. Not even one who is my enemy. Clara's chest rose with a shaky laugh, though it was more breath than sound. Enemy? She repeated. Do you know what they did to me? Yes, he said simply. I saw it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she made no sound, no wail, only trembling shoulders. The memory of the whip, the heat of the sun, the smell of dust and blood all pressed down on her like the desert itself. Tarek laid a hand over hers, roughened from bowstrings and battle, and she felt the warmth of life against her cold, frightened pulse. I hid the boy, she confessed, her voice barely more than a breath. I didn't want him to die. He was just a child. I thought it was the right thing. Tarek's dark eyes softened, though he did not speak. He only shifted closer, his body shielding hers from the chill that seeped in from the canyon walls. The firelight danced across his sharp features, and she noticed scars along his arms, each one a story of survival and battle, of promises kept and oaths honored. I saw your courage, he said finally, his voice low and steady. You stood when most would have crumbled. You endured. Clara shook her head weakly. I'm no warrior. Perhaps, Tarek said, but you have a warrior's heart. That is more than most can claim. The words left her in silence. The fever and pain still gripped her, but now there was something else. A strange, unfamiliar comfort, a sense that for the first time since the whip had struck her back, she was safe. Not just physically, but somehow wholly, protected by a man who should have been her enemy but had chosen another path. Hours passed in the quiet of the canyon. The fire crackled, casting shadows that leapt along the rock walls. Tarek tended to her, sometimes speaking in Apache, sometimes in English, filling the night with words meant to soothe the body and mind alike. Clara listened, drifting between fevered dreams and wakefulness, feeling something bloom in her chest that she did not understand. In the small hours before dawn, she opened her eyes again and found Tarek watching her. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and for the first time she felt that trust, tentative, fragile, but present. I am afraid," she whispered. "You have nothing to fear here," he said softly. "Not as long as I am near." She closed her eyes again, letting the warmth of the blanket and his presence lull her towards sleep. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to rest, her body recovering, her heart beginning to recognize the man who had taken her from the whip and chosen mercy over the law. And in that quiet, fevered valley, a bond began to form. One forged not in comfort or ease, but in blood, survival, and the dangerous closeness of two lives held together against the world. The sun was high now, casting its unforgiving light across the canyon walls. Tarek had built a small camp at the edge of the hidden valley, a place where the desert wind could not carry the whispers of outsiders. Clara sat on a fallen log, wrapped in a blanket, her back still raw but slowly healing. She watched him move with quiet efficiency, sharpening his knife, checking his bow, and scanning the ridges for signs of pursuit. "Tarek," she said softly, her voice still hoarse. "They'll come for us. Your people. My people. They won't let us stay hidden for long." He did not look at her as he spoke. "Then we prepare. We ride only when the night swallows the sun." His tone was calm, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Even the bravest warriors feel the weight of exile, and Tarek was no exception. Hours passed, the heat of the midday sun pressing down like judgment. Then a movement in the distant canyon caught his eye, a flash of brown and gray. He raised a hand to silence her. "Scouts," he murmured. "My people, they are coming." Clara's heart hammered. She had not yet fully grasped what it meant to defy the Apache, to live outside their law. And now, danger approached, not just from strangers, but from the people who were his family. When the riders appeared, Tarek acted without hesitation. He signaled Clara to stay low, hidden behind rocks, and he met the scouts on open ground. The confrontation was tense but wordless. The stares, the drawn bows, the unspoken question, "Will you surrender her?" Tarek did not. That night, the fire burned low, casting long shadows over the valley floor. Clara's back still ached, but her mind raced with fear and admiration for the man who had saved her, and now defied every law of his people to protect her. She watched him clean his knife, the flickering flames reflecting in his dark eyes. "Tarek," she said quietly, "why do you stay? Why risk everything for me?" He paused, then slowly lifted his hand and pressed the blade of his knife to his palm. A bead of dark blood welled and spilled over his skin. Without hesitation, he touched it to her hand, letting her feel the warmth of it. "This," he said softly, "is my oath. My blood binds me to your life. Anyone who harms you will answer to me. Anyone who comes for you must face my hand first." Clara stared at him, awe and fear mingling in her chest. The act was sacred, a promise written in blood, the language of warriors. She felt the weight of it, the irrevocable connection between them. Her hand, pale and trembling, was warm from his touch. You would kill for me?" she whispered, barely believing it. "I would," he said simply. "I would do anything to protect you, and you must know this. If you choose to stay with me, this is our bond. It cannot be broken." Tears pricked her eyes, but she did not pull away. Instead, she pressed her hand into his, letting the blood mingle with hers in an unspoken promise. The fire crackled, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. For the first time since the whipping post, Clara felt a sense of belonging, a fragile trust that went beyond fear. She realized that the man who had saved her was not only her protector, but her anchor in a world that had sought to destroy her. Tarek's eyes softened as he watched her. "Rest now," he said. "For tomorrow we ride. And no matter what comes, you are mine." The words settled over her like a shield. She lay back against the moss, feeling his presence beside her, the firelight dancing across his face, the blood oath sealing their fates together. Outside the canyon, the desert was vast and cruel, but inside this hidden valley they had found a fragile sanctuary, a place where courage, mercy, and love began to intertwine. And beneath the stars that night, two lives became bound not by law or tribe, but by a promise written in blood, fire, and the unforgiving heart of the West. The next morning, the valley greeted them with quiet sunlight, painting the rocks and sagebrush in gold and amber. Clara stirred, her body still sore but her mind clearer than it had been in days. The night had been long, filled with fevered dreams of whips, blood, and shadows. But Tarek had stayed by her side, silent and watchful, like a sentinel carved from the desert itself. Tarek had been awake before dawn, gathering roots and small game for their meager breakfast. He returned with a bundle of herbs and a few rabbits he had trapped overnight. Clara watched him work with a sense of awe. His movements were fluid and precise, a mixture of grace and raw strength. Every action, from skinning the rabbits to crushing the herbs into paste, carried a quiet authority that spoke of countless hours surviving the harsh desert. "Here," he said, placing a small portion of the roasted meat and softened roots before her. "Eat. You will need strength if you are to ride with me." Clara picked at the food, her appetite suppressed by a mixture of fear and fascination. "I've never done this," she admitted, gesturing to the herbs and fire. "You will learn," he said simply, brushing a lock of hair from her face. His hand lingered longer than necessary, and she felt a spark of warmth spread across her chest. The morning passed with them, moving slowly through the valley. Tarek taught her to identify edible plants, to move quietly through the underbrush, to read the wind for signs of danger. Each lesson was infused with patience, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart quicken. She realized with a start that she was learning more than survival. She was learning to trust him. As they paused near a stream to drink, Clara noticed the scars on his arms and chest, each one a testament to battles fought and promises kept. Tentatively, she reached out to touch one, her fingers brushing the deep line that ran from his shoulder down to his wrist. Tarek froze, his eyes darkening with a mixture of caution and something softer, something she could not yet name. "Those are my stories," he said quietly. "Every mark is a promise, a battle, a choice I made to live." I wanted to see," she said, her voice trembling, "to understand you." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert seemed to hold its breath around them. Then, slowly, he reached out, resting his hand lightly over hers. His skin was warm, roughened by life and labor, and the contact sent an unfamiliar shiver through her. "You have courage," he murmured, "not of the body but of the heart. That is rarer than any warrior's skill." Clara's lips parted, uncertain how to respond. She had spent her life in fear, avoiding pain and cruelty at every turn. Yet here, with this man who had saved her and defied his own people for her, she felt something shift inside, a fragile trust taking root where only fear had grown before. They moved on side by side, the silence between them filled with an unspoken understanding. Tarek no longer shielded her entirely, but allowed her to follow his lead, teaching her to trust her instincts and strength. She stumbled occasionally, her confidence still untested, but he never scolded her. Instead, he offered a steadying hand or a reassuring glance, each gesture building a bridge between them that fear could not burn. As the sun climbed higher, Clara realized that she was beginning to see him not merely as her protector, but as something far more, an anchor in a world that had tried to crush her spirit. The thought both terrified and comforted her. That evening, as they returned to the small camp he had made, Clara caught herself watching him with an intensity she had never known. When he noticed her gaze, he merely smiled faintly, a brief flicker of warmth in his otherwise solemn expression. For the first time since the whipping post, Clara felt the stirrings of hope, not just for survival but for something deeper, something she dared not yet name. And in the quiet of the canyon, with the fire crackling and the desert night stretching endlessly above them, trust began to grow, a fragile, delicate thing that might one day bloom into something stronger than either of them could imagine. The morning sun burned harsh and merciless over the valley as Tarek and Clara prepared to move deeper into the mountains. Their temporary sanctuary had kept them hidden, but scouts and whispers of pursuit still haunted the ridges. Clara had grown stronger, her back healing, her spirit mending, but fear never fully left her. Every rustle in the sage, every shadow across the canyon wall reminded her that the world beyond the valley was ruthless. Tarek rode ahead, his eyes scanning the horizon. The valley floor stretched wide and open, a patchwork of desert rock and sun-baked earth. Every instinct in his body screamed caution. The scouts they had avoided yesterday were not gone, they had only retreated to plan. "Do you trust me?" he asked, glancing back at Clara. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "I trust you," she said without hesitation, though a tremor ran through her chest. "I have no choice, do I?" Tarek offered no reply, only a faint nod. Trust in the desert was never simple, but between them it was beginning to form its fragile web. They rounded a bend and entered a narrow pass, the sun glinting off the rocks like molten gold. Then movement, a cloud of dust rising in the distance. At first it seemed like stray wildlife, but the sound of hooves and shouts soon made the truth undeniable. Bounty hunters, men with pistols, rifles, and merciless eyes, charged down the canyon. Clara froze, but Tarek's hand on her shoulder steadied her. "Stay close," he whispered. The fight was sudden and brutal. Tarek drew his bow with lightning speed, arrows striking true, but the sheer number of men pressed them back. Clara, terrified yet determined, grabbed one of the pistols Tarek had given her and fired blindly. Her first shot rang out and a man went down. Fear and adrenaline lent her strength and she shot again, saving Tarek as another hunter lunged toward him. Amid the chaos, Clara saw a familiar face, Nantan, Tarek's younger brother leading a group of the men. His face was twisted in anger and disbelief. Tarek's jaw tightened. He had always known Nantan's pride could be dangerous, but betrayal was another matter. "You've brought them to us," Tarek roared, drawing his knife and spinning to intercept a man aiming for Clara. Steel clashed, dust rose, and the canyon echoed with shouts and gunfire. Clara ducked behind a boulder, her chest heaving. She saw Tarek strike down one man, then another, his movements fluid and precise, each step a deadly dance. Yet Nantan stayed back, directing, observing, his betrayal deliberate, calculated. When the last of the bounty hunters fled, leaving bodies and smoke behind, the valley was eerily silent. Clara ran to Tarek's side, her hands trembling as she touched his arm. "Your own brother," she whispered, horror in her voice. Tarek's dark eyes burned with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "He delivered us here for pride. He thinks he can control fate, but he is wrong." His hand tightened over hers, grounding her in the aftermath of violence. Clara looked at the wounded men, the dust, the blood, and then at the warrior who had saved her again, standing tall despite exhaustion. The realization hit her. Survival was not just about hiding or fleeing. It was about fighting with everything you had, about trusting someone enough to face betrayal together. Night fell as they made camp at the edge of the pass, bodies bruised and hearts still racing. Clara cleaned the blood from her hands with cool water from the stream. Tarek tended to his own minor wounds, his gaze distant and unreadable. "You saved me again," she said quietly, almost a whisper. He nodded, the firelight flickering across his sharp features. "And I will again," he said. "No matter who stands in our way, no matter who betrays us." Clara's chest swelled with a mixture of fear, gratitude, and an unfamiliar courage. She realized that this man, the warrior who defied both his people and the law, had become her anchor in a world that seemed determined to destroy her. And she, in turn, had begun to find the strength to stand beside him, no longer merely a victim, but a participant in her own survival. The desert wind whispered through the canyon that night, carrying with it the scent of sage, blood, and determination. The valley was still, but their bond, forged in fire and betrayal, burned hotter than any sun. The morning broke with a pale light over the canyon, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Tarek and Clara had moved deeper into the hidden folds of the mountains, but news of the betrayal and the bounty hunters had spread faster than either could have imagined. The campfires of his people glimmered like a swarm of restless eyes in the distance, and Tarek knew that the reckoning could no longer be delayed. Clara sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of warm water. The events of the previous days, the whipping post, the flight through the desert, the ambush by bounty hunters, had left her body bruised and her spirit raw. Yet she felt a strange steadiness now. Tarek had saved her life repeatedly, defying every law and expectation, and in doing so, had taught her a lesson far deeper than survival. Courage and loyalty could exist outside the bounds of custom. Tarek approached her slowly, his dark eyes scanning the ridge. "They are coming," he said simply. His voice was low, almost resigned. "My father will not let this pass." Clara's heart sank. She had grown to trust him, to feel protected beside him. But now they would face the full wrath of the tribe, the law of the Apache, and the judgment of a father who wielded authority like a weapon. The arrival was thunderous. The ground seemed to shiver beneath the hoofbeats of dozens of warriors, painted faces emerging from the canyon shadows like phantoms. At their forefront stood Chief Kona, his gray-streaked hair framing a face carved with the weight of countless battles. His gaze fell upon Tarek, cold and unforgiving before settling on Clara with suspicion and disdain. "You have brought her here," the chief said, voice sharp as obsidian. "You bring the blood of the white man into our land, and you defy every law of our people." Tarek met his father's gaze without flinching. "I did not bring her as an enemy," he said, his voice steady. "I brought her because she deserved life. No law commands the taking of life for mercy." A hush fell over the assembled warriors. The chief's eyes narrowed. "Then you will answer," he said, motioning to the medicine man who stepped forward with a rattle of bone and feathers. The air seemed to thrum with the power of ritual, the ancient rhythm of judgment and balance. The chief raised his hand, commanding silence. "Tarek, you have defied me and endangered our people. You will be beaten, as is the law for those who rebel." Clara's pulse quickened. Memories of the whipping post rose like smoke in her mind. She stepped forward, voice trembling yet fierce. "Stop," she cried. "I belong to him now. If he is to be punished for protecting me, then punish me too." The warriors froze, the desert wind holding its breath. Tarek's eyes widened, not with anger, but with awe. He had never expected her to speak with such courage, to put herself at risk willingly for him. Chief Kona's gaze lingered on her, weighing her words. The medicine man lowered the rattle, a silent acknowledgement of her bravery. After a long moment, the chief spoke again, his voice softer, tinged with reluctant respect. "If she is willing to bleed for you, Tarek, perhaps she is worthy. Perhaps she's not merely the blood of the white man, but the heart of one who knows courage." The warriors murmured among themselves, some nodding, others still skeptical. Tarek stepped forward, taking Clara's hand. "She has survived what most would not," he said. "She has stood against fear and pain. If life is worth honoring, then honor her as well." Chief Kona's eyes softened, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Then let it be known," he declared, "that the woman who stands with Tarek shall no longer be deemed a curse. She is under his protection, and he under no man's law but his own conscience." A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the valley. The warriors lowered their weapons, the harsh lines of anger and judgment easing. Even Nantan, Tarek's brother, stepped back, his expression unreadable but silent. Clara looked at Tarek, tears of relief mingling with exhaustion. For the first time in days, she felt truly safe, not just from men but from the weight of judgment and law. The sun climbed higher, painting the canyon in gold. The valley was silent save for the soft rush of wind and the crackle of the fire. In that moment, Clara understood the power of loyalty, courage, and love. The strength to defy even the fiercest law when it demanded the impossible. Tarek's hand found hers again, their fingers intertwined, a silent promise that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The valley was quiet under the silver wash of moonlight, the desert air crisp with the first hints of evening chill. The events of the past days had left both Clara and Tarek exhausted. Battle, betrayal, and the confrontation with the tribe had taken their toll. Yet even in the calm, a weight lingered. Tarak knew that defying the law of his people required a final act of redemption, one that would solidify both his honor and his bond with Clara. "The trial of fire," he said quietly, glancing at her. "It is the way I must prove my loyalty, and atone for what I have done against my people." Clara's heart sank. She had seen him face danger, stand against enemies, even endure betrayal. But this trial, walking through fire, was beyond anything she could have imagined. "Tarak, you don't have to," she whispered, clutching his arm. "You've done enough. You've saved me. You've risked everything, please." He shook his head, his dark eyes serious and unyielding. "This is the only way the tribe will accept both of us. I must endure it. For them, for you, for what we have." As the sun sank behind the mountains, the Apache warriors began their preparations. A pit had been dug, filled with burning coals that glowed like embers from a living heart. The heat rose, shimmering against the rocks, painting the night with shades of red and orange. Warriors circled the pit, chanting in low, rhythmic tones, invoking the spirits of their ancestors. Clara knelt at the edge of the circle, her hands pressed to her chest. "I can't watch," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Tarak stepped onto the edge of the pit, the heat licking at his boots, his stance firm and resolute. He looked at Clara, the firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. "Watch," he said simply. "Watch and know that nothing I do is without thought of you." With deliberate steps he moved into the fire, each footfall scorching the coals beneath him. Flames kissed his skin, yet he walked with a grace that belied the danger. The warriors chanted louder, the rhythm of their voices blending with the crackle of the fire, filling the valley with a pulse of energy and tradition. Clara's hands trembled as she watched him. Her chest ached, not from fear alone, but from the awe and love that surged within her. This was the man who had saved her from death, who had defied his tribe for her sake, who had taken her hand in blood and bound their fates together. Now he walked through fire itself for her, for their bond for life. Step by step, Tarak emerged from the pit, his feet blackened and blistered, his arms streaked with soot. He collapsed on the far side, breathing hard but alive. The tribe fell silent for a long, tense moment before murmurs of respect and awe rippled through them. Chief Kona's eyes met Tarak's, a flicker of pride softening the stern lines of his face. Clara ran to him, dropping to her knees beside him. "Oh, Tarak," she whispered, pressing her hands to his scorched arms. You are alive." Tarak smiled faintly, exhaustion etched into every line of his body. "I am," he said, his voice hoarse, "and I will live, as long as I can protect you." The firelight danced across them, casting long shadows on the canyon walls. Clara pressed her forehead to his, the warmth of his skin searing her heart in a way that neither fear nor battle ever could. "I am yours," she whispered. "All of me." For the first time, the valley was silent in a way that carried peace rather than tension. The tribe looked on, understanding the truth of the bond that had been forged in blood, trial, and survival. The trial of fire had been more than an act of defiance, it had been a declaration. Tarak and Clara were no longer separate souls caught between worlds. They were bound, unbroken, and unafraid. That night, beneath a sky bursting with stars, the desert itself seemed to acknowledge their union. The wind carried the scent of sage and smoke, the whispers of ancestors, and the promise of a life forged not by law or fear, but by courage, loyalty, and love. The canyon was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The fire from the trial of fire had long since died down, leaving only embers that smoldered like the last heartbeat of a storm. Tarak and Clara had returned to their small hidden camp, their bodies exhausted but alive, their spirits unbroken. The events of the past days, the whipping post, the flight through the desert, the ambush, the trial of fire, had forged a bond that neither law nor tribe could sever. Clara lay on a bed of deerskin, her body wrapped in blankets, but it was not her wounds that occupied her thoughts. It was the man who had saved her, who had risked everything to protect her, who now sat silently by the dying embers, his eyes fixed on her with a heat that went far beyond the desert sun. "Tarak," she whispered, her voice trembling, I am yours. I have never felt anything like this." He rose and knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her cheek. His touch was roughened by battle and desert survival, but it carried a tenderness that startled her. "And I am yours," he said, his voice low and steady like the promise of a canyon wind. No law, no tribe, no man can claim what belongs to me. You are mine, Clara. Mine to protect, mine to hold, mine to love. Her heart raced. She had endured pain, fear, and betrayal. Yet in this moment she felt the full weight of safety, desire, and surrender. Every instinct in her body told her to reach for him, to give herself completely to the man who had risked all for her life and freedom. Tarek leaned closer, and their lips met in a kiss that was both fierce and tender, a clash of longing and relief. The world beyond the canyon, the soldiers, the tribe, the dangers of the desert faded into nothingness. There was only them, only the heat of their bodies. The steady rhythm of hearts finally aligned. He moved with deliberate care, his hands exploring, learning the curves and contours of her body, tracing the lines of her scars, each one a story of survival, each one a testament to the life she had endured. She responded in kind, her fingers entwining in his hair, pulling him closer, as if to anchor herself to the one constant in a world of chaos. The blankets pooled around them, soft against the hard desert floor, but the heat between them was a fire that no sun could rival. Tarek whispered her name low and husky, and Clara shivered, her breath coming fast, her body alive in ways she had never imagined. Each touch, each kiss, each shared heartbeat became a language all their own, a communion of trust, passion, and survival. In the quiet of the canyon, Clara surrendered not just her body but her fear, her doubts, her past. She let herself be held, let herself be loved, let herself belong to the warrior who had defied his tribe and the world for her. And Tarek in turn claimed her, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, a partner, a man whose heart and soul were bound to hers in ways no law could sever. Hours passed like minutes, the night carrying their whispered confessions and quiet moans across the desert. The stars above seemed to lean closer, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the joining of two souls forged in fire, blood, and unwavering courage. When at last they lay spent, tangled in the blankets and each other's arms, Clara rested her head against Tarek's chest. His hand traced patterns across her back, and she felt the steady beat of his heart. Strong and unwavering. "You are mine," he murmured again, his lips brushing the crown of her head. "And you are mine," she replied, her voice soft but firm, the words carrying a promise she would never break. The desert night stretched on, vast and eternal. Beyond the canyon walls the world could rage and burn. But within their small camp, they had found something stronger than law, stronger than fear, stronger than survival itself. Love forged in the wild, untamed, and beautiful west and beneath the endless sky. Tarek held Clara close, their breaths mingling, their hearts beating together, a silent vow that nothing, neither man nor fate, could ever tear apart.